When disaster strikes, will you be ready?
Good evening, and we begin tonight with the monster hurricane and its deadly impact already.
When all hope is gone, will the government be there for you? If you're looking for ways to take your prepping to the next level, then you've come to the right place. Broadcasting from a secure and well-prepared location, it's time for Prepping 2.0. And now, please welcome authors Glenn Tate and Shelby Gallagher.
Welcome, everyone. This is Shelby Gallagher with Prepping 2.0, episode 83. So excited. We have one of our prior guests on again, Representative Matt Shea. I have to say that was one of our most popular shows that we had last fall when we had him on talking about some of the political, kind of the political landscape and the potential for political unrest. And we'll ask him about that a little bit more here today. But a couple things I want to go through with. First of all, you're going to notice Glenn Tate's not here with me today. He is busy with a major deadline in his legal work. So we're going to let him work today. I'm sure he would want to be here with us, but not today. But I want to just talk about a couple things really quick. Some of our sponsors, we have some really great sponsors. If you go to our website, prepping2-0.com, and go to the Friends and Affiliates page, you will see them there. Many of them have coupon codes, so definitely encourage you to grab those and get a little extra discount. EMP Shield. Awesome device that they provide that protects your something from an EMP strike. And it has been thoroughly tested and is used in a lot of different places in our world and a lot of different usages. So your solar panel, your solar array, your car, your home, encourage you to go there and check them out. Another one that we have that we enjoy a great relationship with is Numana Foods. We had the president of Numana on with us last fall as well. Inspiring show that we had with him. They do bulk freeze-dried food, which is really great for deep preps and long-term preps, as opposed to freeze-dried food that tends to be in like meal-sized portions. These are going to be in bulk. And I have to tell you, everyone else had toilet paper rush 2020 back in March. I had back in March 2020, I had powdered milk needs and I couldn't find it, but Numana had it and I got some from them. So encourage you to check them out. Another great sponsor that we have is Katie, C-A-T-I. Katie Armor stands for Come and Take It. They provide body armor. So before you check out and go, oh, body armor, that's for like operators and people that are being deployed or whatever. Actually, no, this is every man, everyday person, citizen, body armor, which is great. So there's that. And then the last one is Backwoods Home, great resource magazine. I don't like thinking of it as a magazine because I use it so much for a resource. I keep it on several copies on our coffee table and refer to it often. Great information on prepping, homesteading, new technology, firearms, Second Amendment rights. Oh my gosh, a great resource. So encourage you to check out those great sponsors, but also don't forget, under our Friends and Affiliates page, there are more than just those four folks. We have many friends and affiliates that we provide coupon codes for, and they're all right there. And I encourage you, if you are a business that would like to join in and be on that page, reach out to me at shelbygallagher321@gmail.com, and we will see what we can do. So there's that. Let's see, what else can I talk about? This is one thing that we haven't talked about in a while, and I wanted to make a point today because it kind of touched home with me. We haven't talked about the top 100 list. Again, if you go to our website, prepping2-0.com, in the lower right, there's a link there, the top 100 things that disappear in a collapse based on the Bosnian experience, which I really appreciate because it's a modern day collapse. It's something that many of us remember in our lifetime. And it's modern things, TVs and electronics and things like that, not just things from centuries ago before the modern era. Number 67, if I recall the number, which really hit home for me when I looked at it this week. It's board games and card games and things to help you pass the time when you get bored. So if you are like me and we're about 2.5 or 3 months into this stay-at-home order, how many of you have pulled out the checkerboard or a deck of cards and used them to help pass the time? And also, honestly, spend some time with your family. I have to say this, in the last few days, I used some scrap PVC pipe and I made a ladder golf game. Pretty fun, and found myself with a vice grips and golf balls, drilling holes into golf balls. And if you don't know what that is, go look it up. Pretty easy to make and pretty fun. So, got it all out. Got all the things I wanted to talk about in the beginning all talked about. So we have with us today, I'm excited to talk about this. And it'll be good because we'll get to delve into some of the history there. And you need to know the history because it's important. But we have with us today Matt Shea, Representative Matt Shea, who represents a portion of basically Spokane Valley, Washington. And Matt, are you there with us? I'm not sure if you're still there. There you are.
Yes, I'm still here, and thanks for having me on once again, Shelby. And you can tell Glenn that being a lawyer actually is a skill in the collapse, right? You can tell him that that's okay to list that on your skills inventory for your group. It's not too bad. So good. I want to say that in the last couple of months, it's been so fascinating. Many people have come up to me and they've said one of two things. They've either said, Matt, thank you so much for telling us to be prepared and giving us some ideas on being prepared. Or they've said, Matt, we're so sorry. We didn't listen. We're listening now. What do we do? And I'm sure you've probably experienced that as well, Shelby.
Oh, absolutely. Times 100. And to all of those who said, I'm so sorry, wish I had listened, I encourage you, you can still do it. It's a little bit trickier and a little bit harder. You got to be creative. But if you're ever going to prep, you got to do it now. It's only going to get worse from here. But yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to have you on today and really kind of dig into, and I think it's important because of the landscape we live in now, because, things are not like they were, I don't know, in January, right? Things have drastically changed. And I'm hearing this out of Eastern Washington, and it apply. And every time I talk about something like this, when I feel like, oh my gosh, we're only going to be talking about Washington, and yet we have listeners from all over. But folks, this is what's going to happen. This is prescriptive. You're hearing of these things happening all over as well. Is COVID camps. And I've seen headlines, and I haven't dug deep into it, but I know you have, and that's why I wanted to have you on. So, Matt, the floor is yours. Give us the scoop on what is going on with COVID camps.
Well, first I want to start with talking about how last winter we were talking about the idea that a lot of times collapses are kind of this slow rolling collapse over history. And if you go back all the way through past the Roman Empire, back even into antiquity, you really see that anytime that countries start to go through these things, it really is a slow roll. And I think that 299 Days, the book series, and your book series On a Great State, they really lay out this idea that these things don't happen overnight. They can, or some portion of it can, or maybe a different phase of it can, but in general, this happens over time. And so, like you said, these folks that haven't listened and are coming up and saying, okay, we're listening now, that's exactly the right attitude. And yes, we're Americans, and we can get caught up once we get past the normalcy bias that we may have carried for years. And so, about 12 years ago, I ran into this issue, and this has really tipped me off on some of these things may have been planned for a very long time, but back about 12 years ago, I came across something called the National Shelter Database put together by the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And that database, it had facilities that have been designated, fairgrounds that have been designated as relocation centers in the event of a major national disaster where people were displaced. This was kind of an outgrowth of Hurricane Katrina and some other devastating hurricanes where massive amounts of people had to be displaced for a significant period of time. And so in and of itself, when people are like, oh, there's no such thing as a FEMA camp, that's really, that was a lie. It's not true. There were camps designated by FEMA in this National Shelter Database. And what I discovered years ago was that they particularly liked fairgrounds. And in fact, one law enforcement officer kind of startlingly said to me that they liked fairgrounds because they had existing facilities, and in the case of Spokane, there's a stadium that was right next to it that could be used for in-processing. But also, fairgrounds were typically in close proximity to railroad tracks. And I was kind of taken aback by that statement and always kept it in the back of my head for years. Well, then a few weeks ago, I got contacted by a friend, a great patriot from South Central Washington, Ashley, who was driving by the Klickitat County Fairgrounds outside of Goldendale and saw some trailers being set up. So she took a picture of it, she stopped, and she went and interviewed the two guys that were there helping, and she found out some interesting things. First of all, this was a COVID-19 isolation center that was being set up. She also found out that it was a requirement for every county that wanted to move to phase 2 to have one of these isolation centers set up. Now, in the context of what Governor Inslee said in a press conference a week and a half ago, he said that if somebody was not going to voluntarily quarantine or could not safely quarantine at home, that they would then be sent to a facility of the state's choosing. Those are some of the most concerning words I've heard in years from a governor, and a lot of people missed that he said that. They also missed the fact that on the form, the voluntary quarantine request form, which is up on the Department of Health's website, down at the bottom it says, if you don't comply voluntarily, then we might be forced to make this mandatory through a court order. So then it's not really voluntary. And this became very clear. It's in their own words. And so there were some people out there that said, oh, Matt, you brought up this isolation center. And we did confirm there is one at the Spokane County Fairgrounds as well. There's a facility designated there. And there were two lines of argument against it. They said, oh, this is fear-mongering. Well, wait a minute. You said FEMA camps weren't real when, in fact, there was a national shelter database, and they always have been real. The question has always been, what are they going to be used for? What's the intent? Because I think most people say, yeah, use the fairgrounds for a natural disaster to, displace folks and house them temporarily. It seems like a great idea. But the intent of using these for mandatory quarantine, and this is key, of healthy people against their will, that's something completely different. And I think that's what's raised the level of concern of a lot of folks, and why I would counter those folks to say, oh, this is fear-mongering. No, this is reality. You have to defend why are they trying to do it this way with contact tracing and effectively presuming guilt instead of innocence, following due process laws. They're trying to jump between the voluntary quarantine statute and the mandatory quarantine statute, where the mandatory quarantine statute has some very clear due process implications. And if you go through the voluntary, they just say, oh, it was all voluntary. You could have requested due process back then. We've seen this happen with the MMR vaccine controversy here, and then the mumps epidemic that happened. People were told that it was, and it was implied it was mandatory, but then they came back later and said, no, this is all voluntary. So this idea that isolation centers, internment centers, exist in the United States of America, number one, proves that all of those things that were said in the past poo-pooing this were not just untrue. I have to wonder if this was intentional disinformation. Then you also have the line of argument that comes out and says, well, again, this is voluntary. You don't have to worry about it. Not very many people are using these facilities, so it's really much ado about nothing. Well, wait a minute. Just because it's not being used right now is not the issue. The issue is, why does it exist? And oh, by the way, it's not voluntary according to your own documents. So why are you lying to me about that? So now you have something that you lied to me about years ago. Now you have something you're lying to me about now. What's the real agenda behind this? And I think a lot of people, and I know your listeners, understand that this is no longer about a virus, which is a very low risk for the vast majority of people. This is about control. And so these COVID detention centers, which I helped to break on a national news story, is central to the entire idea that we really don't need government telling us that we need to be safer and that they know better for us. The Constitution was written in an emergency for emergencies and can never be suspended because of emergencies. In fact, it was written for this exact time when somebody would try to pull this type of a stunt and use a very dubious reason to create these centers, and then also to get people used to the fact that these things exist.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with Goldendale, Washington, first of all, it's called Goldendale for a reason. It is just fields and fields of golden, just plains, like open plains. It's a beautiful place. And it's remote-ish. It takes a bit to get there, and some awesome folks live there. It is remote from, like, say, Seattle. When you think of Washington, you think of Seattle. So this is what's happening. And I'm thinking about where I'm living. I'm like, gosh, my county just went to the next phase. I wonder where ours is, right? Because I live in Washington State. But I think it's prescriptive too, because all the states have these phases, and we're trying to aspire to get to the next one and to the next one. And I think it's worth anyone who can hear my voice to go look at what their state is mandating for phase 2, because it makes me wonder. I mean, can you clarify for me, Matt? Is this state by state, or is this a federal mandate that's coming from the CDC, or do you know?
No, what's happening is state by state. The governors are doing this. And Trump, when they put out the CDC guidelines, they said you can open county by county. You don't have to open the entire state all at one time. You can open county by county as necessary, to account for the fact that rural counties, some of them had no cases, some of them only had a couple, that it was very rare in these rural counties, and yet it was still disproportionately devastating to rural economies, which were already teetering on the edge. And you have to wonder, with these, Governor of Washington and Oregon and California doing some of these things together, whether they are intentionally trying to collapse the economy ahead of the election, because these policies don't otherwise make any sense at all. Where you have people at Walmart with hundreds of people and yet churches are closed. Or you have people at Walmart with hundreds of people, but another local mom and pop store that could hold maybe 50 people, that's closed. Those things don't make any sense, and rational, reasonable Americans that love our Constitution have said enough is enough, and they're reopening anyway. And I've seen that across Washington State, but across the country as well. And churches and pastors saying, when the Danbury Baptists wrote the letter to Thomas Jefferson, they asked Thomas Jefferson, is government ever going to try and determine our method, mode, manner, time of worship? And Thomas Jefferson wrote back and said, no, there's a separation of church and state. Government should never try to dictate to the church when they should be worshiping, when they should be open, how they should be worshiping. And yet that's exactly what Governor Inslee is doing today. Governor Inslee is saying when people can have communion, when they can do funerals, when they can do weddings, which are sacraments, by the way, weddings and communion in a church, and when the churches can be open. And that's also why I think Donald Trump finally came out with Attorney General Barr and said, you must open the churches. Because on its face, saying that one business is essential and another is not is unconstitutional, because that is arbitrary. And governors do not have limited power at the state level. Under the 14th Amendment, due process must be preserved at the state level, and you cannot have an arbitrary action at the state level either. And there's dozens and dozens of cases on this. So just saying that a business is essential or non-essential is the wrong question. The right question is, can these businesses open safely? And if they can, then that protocol, if it's followed across the board, all of the businesses should be able to open, not trying to determine and pick and choose one is essential, one is not. And oh, by the way, the ones that are essential have to donate more money to the Democrat Party. And that's not being cynical, but it's pointing out the truth. And so I think that right now for us in this time, we need to understand that there's a lot more coming down the pike, and we should never be used to these restrictions and this idea that governors have unlimited power. It's just simply not true.
So, oh my gosh, I have so many questions, and what I love is I can throw you some strange balls from out of left field because you can handle this. So we have about 3 minutes before the break. Here's the one that just sets all of these things set my hair on fire. And that means a lot for those of you who've seen my hair. I have a lot of hair. So here you go. The one that really gets me these days, because we're now I believe just beginning to see the ramifications of it, is the letting go of jail inmates and prison inmates because of COVID. Keeping in mind, I'll say it 1,000 times, talk about the best place to quarantine is in an 8x10 cell all by yourself. That's a great quarantine situation. I don't care who you are. That's what we've all been forced to do, is sit in our homes, right? But instead we are letting inmates out, and I don't care what you say, misdemeanor crimes, I don't care. I've seen the folks that got a list of the folks that were freed in my county, and it does not make me happy because they are violent offenders that are prone to violence. And we're now just starting to hear cases across the country of several of these people have now committed worse crimes. There's been several murders committed, and nobody's really talking about that either. And we have about 2 minutes before the break. Yep. What are your thoughts on that, Matt?
Well, I think it's important. We talked about this when I was last on the show about how Marxists particularly follow a very organized plan. And there's a lot of folks out there that are being disabused of the notion that these folks just need more education and that maybe they're just not very smart. No, these people are extremely smart. They're following a plan, and it is an intentional plan to try to destroy this country. And I've been very outspoken about it because I've studied Marxist doctrine. I've studied Marxist military doctrine for the better part of my adult life, and they always follow their book. And one of the things in their book that is a precursor to civil unrest is the release of prisoners into the community to create further chaos in the community. It happened in every single country where you saw Marxist revolutions occur. And that has me very concerned because it's part of the playbook.
Wow. So what I think is just so interesting is we're starting out talking about, but it's all connected, which is, so I want to bring us kind of full circle before we take a break. COVID camps. Okay, we've got, these locations, these big public locations that are near railroad tracks. They can house a lot of people. And they're all, the whole notion of this, the nexus for this was disasters like Katrina, where we can house lots and lots of people who've been displaced. And now here we are looking at a Marxist agenda. Whew, we have so much more to talk about, so don't go away. We have Representative Matt Shea with us today, and we have so much more to talk about. Come back on the other side of the break.
We'll be right back with more of Prepping 2.0 with authors Shelby Gallagher and Glenn Tate right after this.
Prepping 2.0 is about that next level of prepping. One of the key 2.0 items to have is bulletproof body armor plates. I used to think body armor was too tactical for a regular guy like me, but it isn't. Give yourself, your family, and your team an unfair advantage when bullets are flying. Body armor used to be expensive and hard to get. Not anymore. KD Armor, and that stands for Come and Take It, makes solid and affordable body armor for normal people. Get body armor while you can. The clowns in Congress are trying to prohibit future sales. KD Armor is the place to get it. CATIarmor.com. Prepping 2.0 listeners get a 10% discount when you use the coupon code GRANT.
When When the grid goes down, darkness will descend fast. Used to be there was nothing you could do about an EMP, electromagnetic pulse, or CME, coronal mass ejection. Now you can protect your electronics, protect your family, thanks to EMP Shield. EMP Shield invented a simple-to-install device that prevents whatever's connected to it from frying in an EMP or CME, and it costs just a few $100s. EMP Shield has been tested by independent laboratories and passed muster with the government, which has ordered lots of them. Google EMP Shield and see for yourself. And save some money. Get a $50 discount per device. Go to prepping2-0.com. Click on the Friends and Affiliates page, then click on the EMP Shield logo. At checkout, use coupon code PREPPING 2.0. It's all one word.
PrepperNet, where preppers unite. Looking to meet other like-minded people in your area? Looking to start your own prepper group? Already have a group? Join PrepperNet.com. PrepperNet has gathered the biggest names in the industry to help unite preppers everywhere. Join John Jacob Schmidt, Scott Hunt, Dr. Bones and Nurse Amy, Glenn Tate, Shelby Gallagher, Charlie Hogwood, Samuel Culper, Survivor Jane, Rick Austin, Franklin Horton, Ryan Mitchell, and Brian Duff. Our team is united. Check us out at PrepperNet.com. PrepperNet, where preppers unite. PrepperNet.com.
Shelby Gallagher here. We found that you need to layer your food preps.
Yeah, this is Glenn Tate here. A lot of times the hardest part of layering is the long-term foods. We love Numana foods, which have a 25-year shelf life and are non-GMO. Also, organic meals are available.
Numana comes in family-style portions and in bulk. This is not backpacking food. It's family meals that last for at least 25 years. The perfect freeze-dried part of your food layering.
You can get a sample of Numana meals for $19.95 and see for yourself. You will be amazed.
Prepping 2.0 listeners get a 10% discount by entering the code PREP.
Go to Numana.com or click the link on the Prepping 2.0 website.
Give it a try. Numana.com. That is Numanna.com.
And we're back with more of Prepping 2.0 with authors Glenn Tate and Shelby Gallagher.
Hey, it's Glenn Tate. What? Glenn Tate, you're not supposed to be on this show. Yes, it's half my show. I can be on this show if I want. What happened was we recorded this show with Matt Shea a few days ago when I had a big work brief, a legal brief that was due, and now it's done. And we wanted to spend about 2 minutes and before we go back to Matt Shea, who's going to be coming up in a couple minutes, the rest of that interview is coming up because of all the riots that have happened, starting off in Minneapolis. I want to give you some quick thoughts of ours on this. And I'm going to say, get ready, get the trumpets out. Time to toot the horn of Shelby Gallagher. She's too classy to toot her own horn, so I will. Toot, toot. She completely called this in January of this year, 2020. She was talking about how Antifa is going to spread out and do riots, elsewhere, and that's what's happening. Tell us more about that, Shelby.
Yeah, I have been saying all along that, since the beginning of the year, that Antifa has been growing and kind of percolating and just kind of sitting on the back burner in the Pacific Northwest. So when we have these riots that show up, they tend to only show up in Portland. Seattle's kind of learned how to settle them down, but they're going to grow. And Minneapolis oh my gosh, and Minneapolis was the spark. And we have various different reports that after the Minneapolis blew up, literally, many of those instigators with these have been Antifa members from the Pacific Northwest, and they are traveling all over right now. So the other thing I want to add to that, though, where do we really dig into this?
Yeah. Well, we have, as you guys know, some of you know, a sideshow on KHNC, which is a Colorado radio station, KHNC 1630, and in the Denver area. And we do a weekly show there. And the Friday of the riots, basically, we did a show on exactly the riots, what our thoughts are. And I got to say, I thought it was one of our better shows. I mean, it was really good because here's the thing, guys. We've been thinking about this kind of rioting and social breakdown and analyzing it and talking to friends and law enforcement, intelligence agency people and blah, blah, blah for 10 years. And so when we see this, it doesn't seem like a live movie. It seems like a repeat episode. And I don't know. So I highly encourage you to check out the KHNC show. That'll be in the show notes for this show, episode 83 with Matt Shea. And now back to Matt Shea.
Welcome back, everyone. Shelby Gallagher here with our awesome guest, Matt Shea, Representative Matt Shea from Eastern Washington. And we're talking about, again, we're in a weird new landscape here with this COVID-19. We've had the the 2 months of being locked in our homes for a while, and now we're all walking around with masks, and now we have this new normal where, at least this week in particular where we live, things are opening up. And I have to say, I'm extremely proud when I go by a business that I know is not essential according to whatever the emperor or whoever decides it's essential. And I see that they're open. And I'll make a point to go use that business and give them some of my money and patronize them because they're walking an edge and I want to support their freedoms to exist. And I do it safely. For those of you who are concerned, I wear a mask. I don't stand too close, all of those things. I'm not careless, but I also believe in freedom. So one of the things that has kind of gotten my attention, because I can see it coming. It's one of those things as this thing unrolls, this whole weird COVID post, January time that we live in is now this whole notion of a vaccine. And I'm keep in mind, I've had all my vaccines. I also had all my vaccines back before it became such a political issue, but I get really concerned when you have some of the powers that be foisting and forcing upon our government this vaccine, and it's big money. And that's the problem that's happened with vaccines, I would say, in the last 20 years, is that big money has learned that they can make big pharma has learned they can make a lot of money off of it. So I saw a press conference about a week to 10 days ago with the governor of Oklahoma. And I don't know his exact words, but the point being that freedom of movement to be able to travel throughout the state from county to county or jurisdiction to jurisdiction would be limited unless you could show proof of vaccination for COVID-19, which again just pushes against what I know to be the Constitution, my rights to free movement, my right to autonomy. And so, and I remember also thinking when I saw that, for the love of all things good and constitutional, do not let Governor Inslee of Washington, Governor Kate Brown, Governor whoever is in California, Newsom, any of these super left-leaning people hear that, because they get bright ideas from that. But you have the governor of Oklahoma Oklahoma is conservative. It is more conservative than purple Texas, making such a statement. So I wanted to get your thoughts. I know it's part of the agenda behind the Marxist desire for revolution. But Matt, what are your thoughts when you hear that?
Well, so I try to dig deep, and recognize who our real enemies are in the world. And very simply, it's Marxists and Islamists and also globalists. And I've been traveling around the country talking about this, but I want to focus on China for a second. When former dictator Jiang Zemin's son runs as one of the overall supervisors the bioweapons program in China, and his grandson runs the remdesivir program, the cure to the coronavirus program, I have to start asking some hard questions. What are they really doing? Why were they even messing around with a virus, inserting proteins like the HIV protein into the virus? Why were they inserting the SARS protein in the virus to make it infectious to humans? This stuff doesn't make any sense. Well, it does make sense if you read something called General Qi's Secret Speech. You can look this up online. It's about 8 pages. It was smuggled out of China by some anti-communists. And in that speech talks about using a bioweapon against the United States of America because the Chinese need, and he uses this German word, Lebensraum, in the document. And Lebensraum, for those of your listeners that may not know, that is a German word popularized by Adolf Hitler called living space. And so the idea was that the Chinese would weaken America with something like a bioweapon, and then also, according to a document called Unrestricted Warfare by 2 Chinese colonels, it's about a 200-page document, by EMP. So in other words, they wouldn't destroy U.S. infrastructure. They would try to weaken the United States to a point where the Chinese would have Lebensraum, or living space. Now, that is startling enough for most people. And go read these things for yourself. But that's startling enough for most people. But to have the evidence coming out now, they were talking about an outbreak and then a viral outbreak and then a cure via vaccination. And now they're saying that, no, you may not be able to participate in the economy, be able to buy or sell or travel unless you have a vaccination. Now we're getting into an Orwellian category that has been the province of preparedness books, and now is right staring us in the face. One of the things that I think has stood out to me with all of this is this narrative now increasing of the dirty dollar, that cash spreads viruses, so we need to go to an electronic currency, and we're seeing that push now. The idea that they have not said publicly what they're doing with the DNA collected as part of the tests for COVID-19. Is that going into a DNA database? Yes or no? No hemming and hawing, no making excuses. What's happening with that DNA? And they can't answer this. I think there is a far more insidious thing occurring right now, and I think more Americans are asking these hard questions, and they're not getting answers, and they're saying enough is enough. And vaccination, mandatory vaccination, is just kind of the tip of the iceberg with this. If somebody is saying, I absolutely have to have a vaccination for a 0.02% likelihood of something, I'm going to say no. I think that the vaccination actually may have a negative effectiveness or negative efficacy rate when the risk to the general population is that low. So then I have to ask, why are you doing this now? And who's behind it? And we see things like Bill Gates or Fauci having a financial interest in it, or the fact that money was transferred from the United States to China to help them build a bioweapons program that they want to use against the United States because that's what their military is promoting. And it just gets into this craziness. As Americans, we need to do several things, and Trump has already started. I'm really happy to see this. I know a couple of his advisors that are giving him information, and that's fantastic. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm too familiar. I just know what information is being given to him, and Trump is acting on that right now. And right now we need to secure the United States, and that's not through a vaccine. And I was really glad to hear the president say that we likely won't need a vaccine to defeat this. And there are other treatments anyways that are non-vaccine related. So being a guy in the military that watched a 19-year-old kid experience pericarditis after an anthrax vaccine and be out for weeks. I know there is danger with vaccines, and it doesn't seem like the risk in regard to COVID-19 even warrants the discussion at this point. So if there is another agenda behind this is in regards to control, we all need to stand up against it. We all need to fight it because right now they're trying to push this as far as they can. And until there is significant resistance, they're going to continue pushing. And eventually we're going to see them, when that resistance is enough, we're going to see them step back and say, oh, you guys blew this out of proportion. We really didn't mean it. That's called the Hegelian dialectical step backward. In other words, they try to take some pressure off by backing off, and then they wait. And maybe a couple years from now, they try to move it forward. When they take that step backward, all of us patriots in the United States of America need to sprint as hard as we can to ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. This horrific abuse of power that we're seeing right now for really monetary gain for a few. Absolutely.
And when you say that, Matt, it makes me just realize this, and Glenn and I said this from the very, very beginning. This is starting out as a virus, but it's going to become economic. The economic impact of shutting down this country is we have only a glimpse of what that has done. I mean, the enormous amount of people that are right now filing for unemployment, and that's just. Let me just put this out there. Hundreds of millions of unemployment dollars alone in the state of Washington were scammed. We're just now getting that. That has been reported by the Seattle Times because
by a Nigerian prince.
I know.
Gracious.
I mean, the words of Donald Trump keep coming to me. The cure is worse than the virus. Oh my goodness gravy. So there's so many layers to this. But so we have about 15 minutes here. So I want to turn our attention a little bit, and I want to give you a different chance. What I love is I can throw you softballs, and you just give great information. So Matt, some folks I've noticed, some fans of yours have noticed, and I'm going to let you take the mic here. Have noticed that you didn't file to run again for your office.
Well, I'm going to say it was kind of entertaining watching the media invent reasons I didn't run again. Mm-hmm. Like I accidentally missed the filing. Must have been incompetence that I didn't run again. They tried to say that I was really secretly plotting to do something else. It's really been kind of entertaining watching them lie and prevaricate over all this stuff.
Well, that's what they've done about you since day one. So it's at this point it was entertaining. But I know it wasn't an accident, that you did that very intentionally.
Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago, actually about 3 weeks ago now, I received a phone call. I had every intention of running, and I received a phone call that kind of changed the direction of our lives. And so I'm not out of the fight. I'm just shifting firing positions, and I can't really say more than that at this time.
So, Matt, let me ask you this, and we're going to change gears here. As we look at this environment that we're in with COVID-19, and we're looking at COVID camps, and we're looking at politicized governors stamping on people's rights, and we as preppers are kind of finding ourselves in the midst of this. And we've talked about this too. Whole lot of new preppers have joined the community and finding themselves kind of in really changing waters. So what's your advice these days to preppers and new preppers, and in what these turbulent times are telling us?
Well, as I said before, I think that right now we are in a time that they're going to try to take, at some point, a dialectical step backward and say, oh, we didn't really mean it. Oh, you guys misunderstood. You blew it out of proportion. And at that moment, a lot of times conservatives, Christians, patriots will just say, oh, okay, yeah. Well, then we just go home and we don't worry about it anymore. Instead, we need to be sprinting right now. We need to be increasing our preparedness dramatically. And right now is exactly the time to buy before inflation kicks in, and while our supply chain is catching up with demand. When this whole thing started, the demand on grocery stores was about threefold higher than it normally is. And now our processing plants have caught up to that generally. And despite artificial rationing of some things, we still have access to a lot of staples like sugar and beans and rice and pancake mix and biscuit mix, and all the things that you and Glenn have advocated on the show before. We need to be buying those things right now. We need to have 2 years or 2 growing cycles worth of supplies. So if you have a family of 4, you need to be able to feed your family for 2 years without ever going to the grocery store again. And that will really, I think, prepare us for this next time, because this is not going to be the last time we have some sort of pandemic. They think that they can use this to really run the ball down the field as far as they possibly can to try to destroy this country. We're going to see some other crisis here, maybe in a couple of years or so, where they're really going to try to move it even farther than they did this time. And I think that right now, again, we need to be sprinting as far as our preparedness is concerned, getting medical supplies, getting our communications locked down, making sure we have everything we could possibly need for about 2 growing cycles. That also includes seeds and buying seed packs. And there's a bunch of different companies that sell those kind of things. But the fact of the matter is you can make your own seed vault, if you will, and prepare yourself for what's coming here. This is not over, but right now we have the opportunity to take advantage of the pause and the situation that we're in right now and really move the ball forward for our side and being prepared. I would say that the second thing, too, is we need to be both spiritually prepared and physically prepared. Spiritual preparedness, Glenn has talked about this before, and I completely agree with him. We need to know, especially as Christians, who we are in Christ. We need to be prepared in our minds for situations that might arise in the future, and have those things settled in our minds. What I learned in combat and coming back from 2 wars was that those people who were Christians, who were prepared in their minds and had answered the question in their mind about how they would deal with a specific situation and done so ahead of time, dealt with the stress and the trauma much, much better than everybody else did. In addition to that, we have to be physically prepared. It's very, very overlooked. But primarily, this doesn't mean you need to look like Adonis or something, but we need to be out there walking, being slim as possible, not being grossly overweight. And we have to have the ability to walk with weight, in other words, a backpack, for a long period of time. And, people ask me, what would you do first for physical preparedness? And I've answered this question the same for years, and it is, you need to be able to have the ability to walk for long periods. And I'm talking like over 10 miles with weight on your back, and not have that, be devastating to your body. Your body needs to be acclimated to it and used to it. And a lot of us, we just don't take the time to be physically fit. We need to start taking the time. And we have the time right now, especially if you're staying at home. And, you're one of the people that has been deemed non-essential by our tyrant governor. So, again, food, medical, communications, most of us have ammunition already, even if you weren't really listening before, and now you are. But we also need to be very clear that we need to be physically fit, we need to be spiritually fit, and I think right now is the time to really sprint toward that goal.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. I agree with all of that. And you know what? I'm going to give myself a little plug here. When you were talking about being able to go long distances with weight on your back, if you've read my 3rd book, there's quite a bit of description because there's a rescue mission that requires backpacking. And I backpacked quite a bit when I was a teenager. And I don't think people realize what that's like when you put 40 pounds on your back and you start walking for 10 to 15 miles a day. And I did that a couple of like 2-week-long treks in my teenage years. And if your feet aren't conditioned to that and the extra weight, and if you aren't used to that weight and you're not used to this, because it's not just, hey, let's go pitch a tent and go glamping. It's no, now when you're done walking, now you've got to work some more to make it so that you can try and sleep that night to be ready to do it again the next day. And I talk about the risks with that. So I absolutely agree with you. You need to be fit. And I will say this, people come to me all the time and say, why don't you sell bigger t-shirts on this sounds really trivial, but it goes to this. There's a point here. We don't sell bigger than 2XL t-shirts on our swag and merch page. The reason why is because I don't want my fellow patriots to think that I'm going to help them be a 3X or larger. Now, if you send to me, if you're a 3X and your BMI is within the realm of normal and you send me proof of that, I'll get you a 3X t-shirt. So that's always been my offer. And so far, no one's taken me up on it. So, but I absolutely agree. And I also think, and we had talked about this once before, and I wanted to see what your thoughts were on this, Matt. This is a great time for skill building. And not Matt, that's you. Glenn and I have just had a lot of fun doing that in the last couple of months. What are your thoughts on that too in regards to skills?
Yeah, well, it's very interesting right now with the supply chain, what's happening. It's not like we don't have enough cows, we don't have enough hogs, we don't have enough wheat. I mean, we export something like 80% of our wheat out of the Palouse right now. So we have more than enough food. The question is the processing of this food. With the meat packing plants closing down, some owned by China, some owned by Brazil, and many people believing, and I would agree with this, that it was a strategic reason that these were closed down to help hurt the United States of America. There is a shortage of butchers. If you want to have a skill to learn right now, and I'm not talking hacking apart a deer once a year as a hunter, because You think you can maybe butcher a cow after that. I'm talking actual butchering skills. That is something that I would strongly advocate everybody learn, because that is where the breakdown in the supply chain is right now. There's a dramatic lack of butchers. In fact, just calling around to some of the butchers here locally in Eastern Washington, they're booked out all the way through spring of 2021 because people are understanding there is a supply chain breakdown. And I think there's going to be, some food shortages here in the fall. I don't think it's going to be as bad as everybody says. But if you want to talk about skill building, being a butcher and learning how to be a butcher, that is a skill we all need now. And as I said at the beginning of the show, being a lawyer is a skill in the class apparently, but being a butcher is probably a more useful skill, especially into what we're heading. And I just want to remark and go back to what we were talking about with physical preparedness, Sue. You can build lung capacity fairly quickly.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Building calluses on your feet and acclimating your feet to walking with weight for long distances is something that must be built up over time, and also the buildup of your shoulder and back muscles, which can be brutally sore if you have not hiked in a long while. So those are two specific reasons that you should start now in building up your physical preparedness as well.
Absolutely. So, and one thing that I feel so bad about, because a couple years ago, I really did want to get some of those butchering skills, and I was too busy getting some books out on the market, and now I'm really bummed. I encourage people to Google it. There's some great groups and great organizations out there that do train and teach you how to butcher, and they consider it a lost art. I'm sure those classes are booked up for quite a while now. So, oh my gosh, so many good things, I think, and Glenn and I have talked about, have come out of COVID and this whole lockdown is what we've just talked about. There's this shifting that's requiring us more of ourselves and requiring more from our preps and more of our skills, which I think there can only be good that comes out of that, and it just prepares us more for when this continues to kind of unfold. Because, like we talked about before, this isn't just going to go back. This isn't just going to flip a switch and we're going to go back to the way it was a year ago. This isn't a permanent thing. So we only have a few seconds left. I always like to leave everyone with a very poignant quote from Benjamin Franklin, who tells us, "Preparing to fail is failing to prepare is preparing to fail." I'm always afraid I'm going to say that. Have a good week, everyone. Take care.
You've been listening to Prepping 2.0 with authors Shelby Gallagher and Glenn Tate. All of the fun and easy prepping information heard on this podcast can be found online at prepping2-0.com. You can also find out more about Glenn's books online at 299days.com and about Shelby's books online at agreatstate.com. Until next time, be smart, be safe, and be prepared.